of the week, conferencing it up in New Orleans. So we've got Thomas Wasson, our enterprise trucking expert, joining us today. We're excited to get you here for your Thursday show.
Always a pleasure to be on, of course, and we'll have me on later on to talk about enterprise trucking, talk about a crossover episode, but also going to have Tony Mulvey on for our on-the-spot feature, and John Barlew of Kenco stops by to talk about improving your warehouse safety plan. But first, our top story takes us to the world of earnings reports, where Uber Freight announced yesterday some interesting numbers. John Kingston joins us more to talk about it. John, welcome, sir.
How you doing, everybody?
Doing
good to see you, Thomas.
pretty
good. To see you, Kaylee.
Good to see you as well, John. Let's jump right into it for Uber Freight's earnings numbers. What we're going to be expecting is a little different than what we've seen for some of these other companies, and honestly, not super great, right?
No, and the Uber Freight's very tough because there's no peer company. I mean, how do you compare a company that was a digital brokerage, then went out and bought Transplace, which is really like a shipper transportation management system, and put that combination together? There's nothing really to compare it to. Now, it should be noted that Uber Freight did make layoffs a couple of weeks ago, about 150 jobs, which they said was about 3% of the workforce. And they said that was all from the digital brokerage. So that's kind of like the legacy Uber Freight operations, which suggests that the Transplace business, the legacy Transplace business, was probably doing okay, that it didn't get hit with any. So, of course, these earnings are not like final net income earnings the way they are, because Uber Freight is buried in with the overall Uber earnings. And so, yeah, it showed a downturn in revenue. It showed that their EBITDA, which is really the prime measurement for them, went negative after being slightly positive in the third quarter. So really, at this point, you kind of almost want to look at them sequentially rather than year to year. Year over year, they kind of did better than last year, but year over year, they were just taking on Transplace. So yeah, I mean, it was not a good quarter. Their revenue was down, which suggests that's not really surprising, because their revenue is going to be on the brokerage side a haircut from every deal they book. And we know that the value of those deals was going to be a lot lower, given that the size of the invoices they would have booked was lower. So, I mean, not really a shocker. Nothing really to move the Uber stock, because the Uber stock is always going to be moved overwhelmingly by what they call the mobility business, which of course is moving humans rather than freight. So I guess it wasn't a shocker, but it does kind of show that the Transplace acquisition isn't enough to make them EBITDA positive. They're going to have to do it also on the digital brokerage side.
Do you think that Transplace's acquisition was maybe the anchor to keep them alive? And if they hadn't have done that, maybe they possibly could have fallen off. If we see earnings results like this, and knowing that the Transplace numbers were enough to just keep them anchored, do you think that without that it would have been lights out for Uber Freight?
I don't think so, because let's remember that. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because there was Uber Freight almost never comes up on the Uber earnings call, but it came up, and it came up this time quite a bit. But there was a question about a year and a half ago by some analyst who said, "Does Uber Freight really fit in with what you're doing?" And the response was, "Yes, it does." And like within weeks, they'd taken like a new $500 million investment from private equity. That was certainly going to keep them alive. That actually took place. I think that took place before they announced the Transplace acquisition. So they had a pretty big shot of funding prior to that. Look, we know that digital brokerage and digital booking is the way to go, whether it's a company like Convoy or whether it's an established company like J.B. Hunt, C.H. Robinson. They're all sinking lots of money. If you were going to make a comparison between Uber Freight and anybody, it would be C.H. Robinson, obviously, which is a publicly traded brokerage company. They had a terrible quarter. I didn't cover it. Mark Solomon did, but RXO, which I think is certainly a C.H. Robinson peer, I just really kind of looked at the headlines. They had a very good quarter. So, kind of a mixed bag here. I'd say RXO really is the more interesting story, that they could do that well, given what a tough freight quarter it was.
And shifting gears a little bit onto the fuel front, looking at the DOE numbers as well. This is the first week that we're seeing the EU sanctions going into effect on Russian diesel. What are some of your early impressions and thoughts so far with this data?
Well, I'm kind of surprised at the diesel market weakness. Diesel has actually been weaker than crude now, which is, as you know, that's the number that I like to look at. Diesel is obviously going to always fall or rise, mostly with the overall trends in crude, but the spread to crude is extremely important too. And that spread has been narrowing pretty consistently now for a couple of weeks. I don't know why. I think the diesel market still has some structural issues to it. I think that first of all, the jet market is really high, so you can start to, you would imagine that diesel production might be morphed into jet production because the jet is the better market. Inventories are really tight. They're not as tight as they were back in the fall when we talked about that, but they're still, compared to historic norms, they're pretty tight. We had a pretty good EIA inventory report yesterday. Stocks built more than 2 million barrels in the U.S. That's a good number. Refinery runs were up. That's good. But I'm not sure that I fully get why diesel's been so bearish. The winter's obviously a very big reason. Winter as a factor in diesel, I think is over here. On February 9th. You've done most of the heating. Whatever you're going to need to heat from now on can be drawn from heating oil stocks that are already in place. So I already look into next winter. Are we going to get another really warm winter, or you get a cold snap? And you're going into the build season at a pretty low level. So I'm still a little bit bullish on diesel. I'm surprised at the steep fall, and again, relative to crude.
So alongside of that, Donnie Gilbert's been talking a lot about the spread between retail and rack prices here these last few days. He's going to touch on that a little bit later on in our carrier updates. What are your thoughts there on how that's changing, how that market looks right now?
I think that's a market that always has a significant lag in it. And when you get this kind of volatility, the lag just gets worse. The fact is retailers, let's operate from the point that, first of all, the futures market and the wholesale markets do correlate very closely. And then you've got the retail market. And these swings have been so crazy and so wild that no retailers really have it in their mindset to react that quickly to price changes, whether they're up or they're down. Certainly not down. They're going to try to hold their prices as high as possible as long as they can. But, in sort of this bygone era, when a wholesale diesel price might move, a few cents over a course of days, and now it might move 8 or 9 cents a day, retailers are just not equipped. I mean, they're physically equipped. They can change the sign, change the price however easily they want, however readily they want. But they're just not of the mindset to change their prices that fast. So, yeah, that retail to rack price is going to be very volatile.
And looking forward, other potential things to keep an eye on real quick. Do you think that China's reopening post-COVID, ending of Lunar New Year, any of that extra consumption, especially with their economic activity, you think that's going to just draw on Russian stockpiles, or do you think that may potentially move the needle in the global markets?
Well, it doesn't matter where they draw it from because it's all one big world market. I mean, you mentioned Russia. We did have the ban on EU imports of Russian diesel and all products that went into effect over the weekend. We also have the price cap. This is going to be a little more interesting because the price of Russian diesel right now is above the price cap. So we never really got that test in crude because the price of Russian crude was always well below the price cap. Now Russian diesel is above the price cap. So if you see the shipping companies, if you see the insurers steer away from taking that Russian crude, if the shipper of it cannot guarantee that the price of it is below the cap, that could potentially squeeze this market. That's another reason why I'm probably leaning a little more toward bullish. If anything, I think the new Russian restrictions are bullish. I don't think they're going to go into effect as smoothly with products as they did with crude, but certainly not diesel. So, and then, you throw in the pace of Chinese increase, and I think the case for diesel bulls right now is stronger than for diesel bears.
All right, John, thank you so much for joining us to talk about both of these topics. We can catch you drilling deep tomorrow afternoon. Any sneak peeks of what's up on the episode?
I taped it so long ago, I got to remember what it was about. Sarah Chu, she's a professor up the road at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. Just joined the logistics team up there. And this is going to sound like an old broken record, but she's been looking at blockchain in logistics, which I think the academic case for it is strong, given the capabilities of blockchain. The question is it ever going to become reality? And she's going to bring that, she's going to discuss that on Drilling Deep.
All right, John, thank you so much for joining us. We can catch Drilling Deep tomorrow here on FreightWaves TV. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to head on over to the wall. We've got our first carrier update with Tony Mulvey and Donnie Gilbert.
welcome into this carrier update, Donnie. We're going to start here looking at a map. It's an interesting one because we're looking at two indexes that are very similar in nature. They're built off of the same base, but what they actually show is very different.
Yeah, so I'm going to run a map and a chart before I get to what I really want to talk about.
Yep.
So I'm going to start with the shading is OTMS, outbound tender market share. On top of, and I just went ahead and put out, I love our 3D maps. I like putting it on top of things. I always want to use my 3D. So I put it on top of OTV, our volumes. And if you look at them side by side, at first, yeah, they look the same. But then when you start getting into the change maps, they're a little bit different. So OTMS is basically we've taken our OTVI and we've changed it to a percentage.
Yep.
Everything adds up to 100%, all 135 markets. But I want you to see what are the main markets. Where is all the main freight in the U.S.? And of course, you see sticking out Southern California.
Yeah, not really a surprise.
You put that together, it's bigger than probably the rest of the markets together here. Not together as all of them, but all the other major markets. You got Dallas, Houston. Memphis is pretty big here. Atlanta sticking up here, Chicago, Columbus, Indianapolis, and of course Harrisburg and the New Jersey port markets. So these are the main markets in the U.S.
Yeah.
Now, let's go to the next chart. What does this mean? I'm pre-building my year-to-year comparison. Now, this year, right now, we're at 10,128. We're still above 10,000. This is my OTVI, everything all together.
Yeah,
so right here we are. We're comparing to last year, which you see this line right here. This is 15,000.
Yeah.
So what happens on these year-to-year changes? And I'm going to look at the OTMS year-to-year change. Well, keep in mind, we've gone from 15,000 to 10,000. So all the markets together have shrank.
Yep.
Instead of 100% equaling 15,000, now 100% equals 10,000.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and pull it up here, the next chart. This is OTMS yearly change. We're comparing right now to this time last year, which we just saw.
Yep.
And when you see these markets in blue, these are the markets that have gotten bigger percentage-wise.
Yeah, relative to the rest of the market, right?
Yes, and there's a couple of ways that can happen. Either one, a lot more volume's been coming out of that market, and it's just really grown.
Yep.
Or all the other markets around could have shrank.
Yep.
And that's really what we've kind of seen here. So it's still a good map to use because you can kind of see, point out the markets that did not shrink.
Yep.
And so they're kind of now like top performers. So LAX, we know LAX has shrank.
Yeah.
We've seen the imports coming in. You'll talk about that a little bit later on the spot. But Phoenix has grown. We know there's been a large exodus from California. A lot of them going to Phoenix. So Phoenix has gotten bigger percentage-wise. Fort Worth, Houston, and then some here through the southeast.
Yeah, I mean, look on your East Coast, right? That shift in imports, you can almost see it here, right? Houston, Savannah, Baltimore. Those are markets that have taken share from a market like Ontario and LAX.
So you can still get some real good top performers by using this map. And when we come back, Tony, we're going to look at some of these markets, and we're also going to bring them up on our lanes of the day.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, Donnie. As always, right now we'll hand it over to Kaylee Nix.
All right, thanks, guys. Here's a look at your first look at top stories this morning from FreightWaves.com. Chicago Rockford International Airport announced that Menzies Aviation, a major provider of ground services, will operate a new 5,000 square foot cargo terminal that will stand as a cargo alternative to Chicago O'Hare. Plans to add a fourth cargo facility by the middle of the decade, with construction on a new taxiway and fuel farm to begin this year. Rockford is home to the second largest UPS air hub in North America and a regional Amazon air hub as well. It also serves Atlas Air, Emirates, Korean Air, and Silkway West Airlines with their cargo operations. FleetCor Technologies had a better than expected fourth quarter with a revenue of $883.6 million, a 10% increase year over year. Net income came in at $225.3 million, a $0.3 million increase with adjusted earnings per share of $4.04. FleetCor beat EPS estimates by 13 cents and beat revenue estimates by over $10 million. Chairman and CEO Ron Clark said that organic revenue growth and corporate payments supported these good results. And Norfolk Southern's Northeastern network could be facing significant disruptions for the near future as investigators clear the site of a train derailment that happened last week. NS told customers that there was no estimated time for when service might return to the routes. Affected lanes include Chicago to the northeast, a portion of New York and New Jersey and Cleveland, the Kansas City to the northeast lane, as well as others moving out towards the Midwest. The train derailed last Friday at East Palestine, Ohio, and included 20 cars carrying hazardous materials. The incident has blocked the two main Norfolk Southern lines that run through the area. And you can find details of these stories and more by heading on over to FreightWaves.com or logging into our FreightWaves app. If you're watching us live on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe to stay updated, and head on over to tv.freightwaves.com for everything else you might have missed during the week. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our first check of weather. Don't go away. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
From the truckload quoting page within TieTMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TieTMS can optimize your quoting process.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our first check of the weather here this morning. We watched the rain and some severe storms move to the southeast yesterday. Ahead of that cold front, we've again got some strong winds going on all the way across from the Great Lakes, down through the Tennessee River Valley, and then even down close to the Gulf Coast. So let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. The hard thing about these wind advisories is that the coloring on our map is kind of hard to see. So we're just going to kind of roll over it. But we've got wind advisories in place all the way up from Michigan down in through Indiana, into Ohio, into Kentucky. Once you get into Ohio, we've got high wind warnings in place. That does include Columbus and Cincinnati, up to the northeastern parts of the state and up to Cleveland as well. And basically any place that you're seeing these high wind advisories or high wind warnings today, it's going to make driving pretty difficult out there. For our wind advisory areas, we're going to be seeing sustained winds between about 15 to 25 miles an hour with gusts ranging between 30 and 35. For our high wind warning areas, we'll be seeing sustained winds between that 30 to 35 miles an hour range with gusts upwards of 45 to 50 miles an hour. So drivers moving through these areas need to be super careful. And the terrible thing about this is that our winds are going to be moving northwest to southeast. So that affects crosswinds not only on our east to west running interstates, but also on our north to south running interstates. So you get that kind of crosswind pattern that goes every which way, no matter which way you're driving. So just be super careful out there today, no matter how you're going. All of our interstates through here really do crisscross each other as well. So there's not really a true north-south orientation. Just be super careful out there. Wind advisories also stretch down into central Alabama and into Mississippi as well. Some places down there throughout the deeper south, we're going to see some lingering shower and thunderstorm activity from what we saw kick off yesterday. But overall, the bulk of the severe weather happened yesterday. We don't necessarily have to worry about the severe threat today. We are going to be seeing continued rainfall transitioning into snow for the parts around the Great Lakes coming up today. We'll talk about that later on in the show. Right now, we're going to toss things over to Christian Thomas for our first check of the social roundabout.
Thanks, Kaylee, for those weather updates. Now today, February 9th, if you haven't picked out lunch yet, maybe I'll help you pick one out. Today's National Pizza Day. Definitely want to check out, find a pizza place, might have some deals going on. I know whenever I was on Twitter, I found a lot of local restaurants giving out some deals. Just look it up. Pizza, really good. If it wasn't for buy one, get one free at Buffalo Wild Wings, I'm sure we'll definitely be having pizza in the boiler room. But anyways, let's switch it up a bit. Super Bowl this weekend. And one zoo out in Des Moines, Iowa, got a baby giraffe to pick the winners. Let's take a look at one of the local news stations covering that.
Well, the Super Bowl just 4 days away, and people are laying their bets on who will win between the Eagles and Chiefs, and even the animals at the Blank Park Zoo have an opinion about the game. This morning, Bakari, the zoo's baby giraffe, made its pick by eating leaves by the Kansas City Chiefs logo. Faked you out, Eagles, with some help from the baby's mother. The Blank Park Zoo says its animals have correctly picked the winner in 9 of the last 12 Super Bowls. So keep that in mind if you're making a bet.
Chiefs, they picked the Chiefs. We'll see how that goes this weekend. Anyways, Kaylee, Thomas, what do you think about that? Giraffes winners.
I think I've seen weirder things before. What do you think, Thomas?
I need to let it pick my 401k. And we'll really have some skin in the game. I think given its track record, we may have a shot.
There you go. You let a giraffe pick your investments, and you might be better off than picking them yourself.
I don't know why it likes apples so much, but it's a real cool giraffe.
All right, Christian, thank you for that. We'll talk to you a little bit later. Right now, we're going to welcome in Jay Grimes. He is our Director of Federal Affairs over at OOIDA. To talk a little bit about what's piquing the interest in Washington, including ELD removal trends. Jay, thank you for being here.
Good to be with you. I've got to say, I agree with the giraffe's pick on Kansas City there.
All right, we know that we've got at least one Chiefs fan in the house. As your resident Cowboys fan, I have nothing to say. So let's go ahead and move right into our topic for the day. Obviously, we know we're starting a pretty big year with a new Congress in Washington, which means OOIDA having to go and now rally around basically a brand new group of people. What are you guys really working on right now so far in Washington?
Yeah, so Congress is back in full swing. We had the State of the Union this week, our first hearing over on the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee. So we have all the committees formed together. They're getting back to work. OOIDA certainly focused on continuing momentum on expanding truck parking capacity. So we're looking forward to reintroducing the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, which would really dedicate federal funding to building more and new parking spaces, converting existing or shut down areas back into more truck parking spaces. That's been a focus for us. Also, making sure truckers have access to restrooms at shippers' facilities when they're loading and unloading. And then, as always, continuing to fight back against, one-size-fits-all, overly burdensome regulations. We are expecting perhaps some action on the speed limiter rulemaking this year from DOT. And we do have some news regarding some EPA emissions rulemakings coming out this morning as well, too, that we're excited about. So always busy here in D.C. when it comes to trucking legislation and regulations.
Feels like there's a lot going on as well, especially in trucking, given the speed limiting rules, and we're seeing some movements on ELDs. When you're working with a divided legislator, you have a new Congress coming in. Is there something where we may see some bipartisanship on low-hanging fruit, or does it take a little bit of extra effort on the informative front, trying to get these legislators caught up to speed on the importance of it?
It's always a combination, and it's always moving. So certainly we have a lot of members back in Washington in the new Congress that are familiar with some of these issues. And certainly, truck parking is really an example of a bipartisan issue. That seems to have caught the attention on legislators on both sides of the aisle. Congressman Mike Bost on the Republican side from Illinois, and Congresswoman Angie Craig, a Democrat from Minnesota in the House, Democratic Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming have really led the charge in each chambers, and we've seen co-sponsor support from both sides there. So that's one that we're pretty optimistic about, considering all the bipartisan support. Some issues are more along party lines, and you do have to kind of try and gather support, make the case for those that might be in a disagreement. Certainly from the education side, we have a whole host of new members that are now serving on the different related transportation and trucking committees. So the first part of this year, we're certainly going to be meeting with those new members, educating them on trucking, specifically from the small business perspective, and letting them know what they can do to help small business truckers help improve the state of the trucking industry.
I think one of the biggest challenges that comes with a new Congress coming in is, of course, that education perspective. It's also maybe one of the downfalls of the fact that we have these elections every 2 years for our congressional representatives. But it's interesting to know that when we get this new Congress come in, any bill that wasn't finalized through the original Congress, the outgoing Congress, now has to be reintroduced. And we're seeing that with some of these transportation-related bills as well. Thinking specifically of the reintroduction of the 18 to 20, the underage interstate driving rules that are coming up. Do we lose a little bit of effort, or is it kind of tougher on you guys to have to go back and now rally behind these bills that were introduced, didn't make it, and now have to go through the entire process again? Like, it almost feels like counterintuitive to continue to do that, right?
Yeah, there's pros and cons to some of the turnover. Certainly, sometimes you lose members that have been supportive of your issue, really have a institutional knowledge of how Congress works, how the committees works, and can help get some of these bills actually enacted. But on the other hand, you've got some new faces that can bring new and fresh perspectives, and perhaps can take charge of some new issues. And as far as it can be tricky, yeah, you've got to formally reintroduce the legislation, so you kind of got to get your gang back together, but it also, again, provides a new opportunity to build momentum if that bill hadn't been enacted in previous Congresses. So some pros and cons to the congressional process as a new Congress begins every 2 years.
And I wanted to grab your thoughts real quick as well. We're expecting to have some rulemaking from the EPA regarding NOx emissions. My favorite personal pet project, urea and the diesel particulate filtration saga, but especially coming from OOIDA and your standpoint, is this something where we're seeing maybe California taking point and the EPA following suit, or is this something where you're able to lobby the EPA? What are your thoughts coming up? Is there anything we need to be paying particular attention to?
So yeah, this EPA NOx emission rule, as you mentioned, it follows a little bit in line from California's standard, not quite as stringent as the California rules, but this was a proposal that was finalized by EPA in December of last year. We really think it's going to create a rush timeline beginning in model year 2027 to kind of meet some of these stringent emission standards. But just this morning, Senator Deb Fischer from Nebraska, along with 33 other senators, have introduced a Congressional Review Act resolution, which would really be aimed at overturning the EPA rule. We think there needs to be some changes when it comes to this latest EPA emissions rulemaking. Far too often we see these EPA emissions technologies and requirements really end up adding on to costs for small business truckers. The new trucks that have to meet these requirements end up being so expensive, so unreliable that a lot of truckers, can't afford them. They don't want to invest in the new trucks because they don't know if they're going to run properly, and that really doesn't help get some of the cleaner trucks that can improve air quality on the roads in an efficient manner. So we have a lot of concerns with the EPA's rulemaking. Hopeful this new legislation can examine some of those shortcomings.
So, Jay, we appreciate you coming on the show today to talk about this. Obviously, part of OOIDA's job is education, not only for the new congressional representatives, but also for your members and maybe folks who are newer to the industry and want to find some resources. If drivers want to learn a little bit more about OOIDA, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, OOIDA.com. Certainly, we're on Facebook and Twitter as well, providing updates. Check out our landline news website, and as well as fightingfortruckers.com for all the DC information.
Thank you so much for coming on. Looking forward to also seeing what you all are working on, as well as these rulemakings coming in. As a trucking expert, I'm getting my popcorn out. The Super Bowl may be coming, but I'm actually more excited about legislation. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Looking forward to having you on again.
All right, we'll see you next time.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be back with our next carrier update, and Thomas himself will be here to talk loaded and rolling. Don't go away.
From the truckload quoting page within TieTMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TieTMS can optimize your quoting process.
Like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Wasson, enterprise trucking carrier expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. In this carrier update, Donnie, gonna look at one of those markets that we talked about that we saw has taken market share, but it's not because volumes have necessarily grown.
Yeah, and we're looking at dry van volumes here, which is the majority of the volumes. But you see the little blue line there. It's below last year, which is this green line. Not by much, but the point is it actually is a smaller market by volume But because the rest of the markets out there have shrank, it looks like it's now one of the larger markets. It's increased its market share because everything else has shrank. So this is Houston here, and this is one of the ones that we saw popping up in a very, very dark blue, which means it's one of the largest, the biggest movers on our map.
Yeah, and looking at that, it means, hey, things aren't as bad. Like in this market, things aren't as bad in Houston as they are maybe in some other markets across the country. And that's where understanding what's going on with volume levels as a whole, right? Where we looked earlier in that carrier.
Let's go to the next chart, and this will also help you out here.
Yeah.
This is OTMS for Houston.
Exactly. So you've been able to take market share. Volumes, I mean, largely, if you look at that, they're pretty close to where they were a year ago. They're down a little, but I mean, we're talking, what, 40% decline when we're talking OTBI as a whole. We were talking, what, a couple of percent for Houston? And that's why you see OTMS able to grow and become a bigger market in a period where the overall market's softening.
Yeah, so this time last year, we were at about 2%.
Yep.
And it's increased to 2.99%. For market share of the entire U.S., a 1% increase is very big.
Yeah.
And we were talking off air, you know, we see where California shrank, the LAX, Ontario, and you saw a large increase in Houston, Jacksonville, Savannah, Baltimore, New York. And these are all port markets.
Yeah.
Which last year everybody was trying to avoid that West Coast because they were backed up, 75 ships, and waiting a month plus to get unloaded.
Yep.
And you saw that freight start coming around. So a lot of interesting details here, and this is how you can look at it using charts, using it. We'll go to one more market here. I want to bring up Harrisburg, PA. This is one of the markets that deteriorated. Here last year it was over 3.5%, and now it has slowly come down, and it's down to 2.93% of the market share. And this is one of the big feeder markets to the Northeast. The Northeast absorbs a lot more freight than it actually produces. So Harrisburg is one of those key markets that delivers into it. Now, we also saw Detroit up on there, a big blue spot there on Detroit. Let's go to the next chart here and look at Detroit. Now, the reason I brought this up is you need to break this down and look at why these markets are changing or what's going on before you just go diving into Detroit and then you can't find any freight all of a sudden and wondering why is Detroit such a large market? It does have a lot of freight.
Yeah.
But I jumped in here and I broke it down. Long haul, short haul, mid-haul, tweener haul, they're all down here, very small numbers.
Yep.
It doesn't have a lot of outbound freight. You go and you look at what's in the city within here, the 50 miles of Detroit, 139. That's bigger than all the other distance.
Yeah, it's a lot of cross-border, a lot of automotive moving from one manufacturer to another, assembly plants and the like. So not really a surprise when you look at that, but that's why it's so important to break it down, because if you just went into Detroit, you could get stuck there. Yep.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this update, Donnie. We'll be sure to check in with you later. Right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee and Thomas.
Everybody, it is Thursday, which means that our FreightWaves Community Spotlight of the Day goes to the one and only Thomas Wasson, not only my co-host for the day, but our host and writer of Loaded and Rolling the Show and the newsletter. Thomas, put on your second hat. There we go. And let's talk a little bit about communities for you. Starting off, cargo theft.
This one was fascinating. Coming out of Noy Mahoney as well, writing about total thefts in 2022. So the TLDR is we're up 15%. Over $223 million worth of goods were stolen, which is fascinating. And that if you live in California, Texas, or Florida, those are the top 3 places where items are stolen. So they're writing about, you know, when we talk about trucking and stuff, a lot of times we forget that these things are only secured by a plastic seal or like a padlock. So you know how you like chain your fence so your dog doesn't get out? Well, also about $50,000 worth of cargo is only secured by a similar contraption. So what we're seeing right now is usually 9 out of 10 are organized crime. And you know, when we're talking about cargo theft, it would be as simple as let me roll up to a truck stop with a pair of bolt cutters, take some stuff out, bada bing, bada boom, and to close it back up, And then nobody really knows until you show up. And sometimes even then, it's like, takes a minute.
So you get to your receiver and they're like, why am I missing half of this weight? It's really interesting to me that the majority of these thefts come out of California. They'll land with all the laws. Texas, the land where, as a citizen, you basically get to write your own laws. And Florida, the land that has no laws, right? Like, is this because we're looking at major port cities in California, a lot of cross-border in Texas, and then again, major port cities in Florida?
Yes, if you're a cartel, you're also very entrepreneurial-wise. And so when we're looking about the city's major crossings, obviously Latin American drug trade and stuff goes through ports like Miami, as well as ports of Jackson and other locations. Texas has the Laredo and El Paso crossing, and California has the ones down near San Diego. But it's not just that. Not only is organized crime predominantly, when we're talking about organized crime, mostly it's cartel-related activities. Unfortunately, the Italian mob hasn't been as popular since Godfather in the 90s. So, that is, and it's also, those are three very large states that move freight. I'm sure Georgia and a few others are up there in the top 10. But, when we're trying to predict why this happens, there's opportunity. Just like a distribution center has supply and demand, if you're a cartel or you're using if you're in the crime gang, you have a demand for stolen televisions or a demand for consumer household goods, which are, by the way, the first two types of things stolen. So, I'm an enterprising young gang person who needs a new KitchenAid stand mixer. Well, there's a distribution center. So this is what we've also noted as well. They'll literally just stake out a distribution center until they figure out what it sells. Energy drinks are another surprising one. Yeah, surprisingly, instead of spending $2 or $3, stealing energy drinks is one of the top things stolen. So we're seeing a rash of cargo thefts. What does that mean pragmatically? As your friendly neighborhood resident trucking expert, HVP rules apply, and so do the Wild West. 200 miles, no stopping. Make sure you have hours. If you're hauling a thing of cell phones, sometimes they'll have vehicles that are trailing you. If you're usually running freight that's like televisions and cell phones as well, high value product over I think it's over $250,000 in cargo, you normally are going to have stricter standards. I still won't stop it though. Televisions are great things to steal. So, it's hard as a driver. You worked all day, you finally get into your truck parking place, no one backed into you this time, and next thing you know, you wake up in the morning and someone stole your stuff. I've seen it happen many times. So looking for pragmatic solutions, it gets tricky because right now, freight's very commoditized, so we just write it off on insurance.
There you go. That was going to be my final question is, does the responsibility then fall on the driver? Is there insurance that covers this type of stuff? And if you're a small fleet versus an enterprise fleet, where are you hedging your bets on where to protect yourself from theft? Well-lit areas, very large truck parking with hopefully cameras. Good luck if they work, by the way. You can get hit if you have an accident in a truck stop, they don't even know if the footage works half the time, and it's private property. So that's another fun topic for another day. But pragmatically, making sure your stuff is secure, not being in a location that is high crime. I mean, if you're in a large city, it's usually safer to go out. Very often, unless they've been watching that particular distribution center, that's why you want the 200 miles. You're enterprising criminal if you get out of LA and you happen to get a thing of Red Bull and you stop at the truck stop in Ontario, that's right in my backyard. But if you drive 200 miles out going towards Arizona or on the border, I don't want to drive that far to steal your stuff. There's a bunch of other people already parked. So just pragmatic steps like that. All right, Thomas, interesting stuff there. Let's talk a little bit about the LMI, Logistics Managers Index, dropped yesterday. We saw that contraction of the freight markets is slowing, but still not necessarily a good sign. We're getting closer to that 50 number, and 50 is the break-even point between expansion and contraction.
Exactly. It's like reading tea leaves, but LMI does have some great data. Even though they quoted the Wall Street Journal for most of their sources, I have so much to give, folks. Just subscribe to my community newsletter as well. Paul Page, if you're listening, call me. I got you, fam. But anyways, I digress. So it's an interesting data because the LMI goes up from like 54 to like 56. So we have a little bit of movement. It was the first time in like 7 or 8 months it stopped going down. So that's some progress. But fascinatingly enough, 2 takeaways. 1, we are seeing that people bought stuff over the holidays, and just like my pipes are clogged after the Super Bowl, we're seeing some movement slowly in terms of replenishment. Now, the problem is, which is step 2 of this wonderful narrative, is that as we're seeing this movement, warehousing space is still at a premium. Warehousing space, there's just not enough space. So in spite of the fact that you and I could be large shippers and we manage to clear up some of our supply problems, through these replenishment cycles, we're still having this kind of hangover, a little bit of fuzziness. And so what this means for most trucking companies, transportation capacity is in the 70s still. There's still way too much trucking capacity while pricing is in the 40s, which shows that, if you're a carrier, the weather conditions are not so well. So this LMI, I would say, is a mixed bag. Yes, we're making progress. Good for shippers, not good for carriers, because you still are just hanging out in the wilderness, so to speak, until the market turns or enough of your cohort decides to leave the market, so that way the equilibrium resumes.
So on that note, carriers and how they're faring, obviously we're in the throes of Q4 earnings releases and full year 2022 earnings releases. Has there been anyone that's released anything that has really surprised you on the enterprise carrier side?
Well, honestly, right now, no big surprises. Everyone's finally figuring out. Large carriers with their contracted rates are usually the latest to the party, and by then the party's already out of beer. So that's kind of how it works as a large enterprise carrier. But they're going to be the first ones eventually to capitalize as things start changing.
Right, they'll start their own party.
For smaller carriers, though, it's rough. It's extremely rough out there. If you're looking at a situation where you're trying to book on the spot market, it's really reminiscent of the Hunger Games. Here's a great example. Spoke with a large broker that actually a small carrier booked loads through CH's Navisphere, had the loads guaranteed to them, but it turns out they gave them to a large enterprise carrier instead because their rate was cheaper. And so this behavior, it's really fascinating because I used to be that guy. $1.50, I have to fill the bucket. I run 7,000 loads a week. If I need to take $1.25, that's fine with me because I have 5,000 trucks. Now, the smaller carrier, though, has to run at $2 or above. So we are seeing this behavior out there. Right now, it's a matter of smaller carriers who can hang on. And it's not like doom and gloom. When we're talking about this movement, it doesn't take much, 10%-ish of the market to 20, When we're saying a bloodbath, we're not saying like half of y'all not going to make it. This isn't Omaha Beach, folks. What we're saying is a notable amount. It could be upwards of 5 to 10% of trucking capacity could leave the market. That would still be quantifiable enough to say now we're starting to see the pendulum change. It doesn't take much because you have to remember everyone's locked in contract rates, spot market movers. It's not as if, when we're talking about 95% of all freight, between 85 and 95% preferably likes to be moved on, contracted rates. It doesn't take much. We're seeing some movement. We're not there yet.
All right, Thomas, well, thank you for being here to talk loaded and rolling as well as co-hosting with me today. Of course, we've got the show that airs live on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock right here on FreightWaves TV. And head on over to our communities page up on FreightWaves.com to subscribe to Thomas's newsletter, as well as to every other newsletter in our community's ecosystem. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Let's go. Nobody works for free, so why should we be expecting our drivers to? Okay, let's just get it together now. What are some of those proactive steps that you can start taking now? For myself, I would like the Earth to still be here for a little bit longer, but is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, okay. Is pizza an open-faced sandwich? It's bread.
I have been ready for this question. I've seen the show.
We're all in this together.
Thanks for making me hungry. Now I want a hot dog.
You're welcome. Catch episodes of Check Call Tuesdays at 12:30 on FreightWaves TV. Keep up with all things Check Call on FreightWaves.com/CheckCall. See you on the internet.
From the truckload quoting page within TieTMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TieTMS can optimize your quoting process.
And welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our second check of the weather this morning. And we saw that pretty quick moving cold front slide up to the northeast yesterday. We talked about the winds on the front side of it, but on the back side, we're also going to be seeing some strong winds as well as some heavy snowfall filtering down the central mountains of New Mexico and in through the Mountain West. So let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events right now. We've got some lingering snowfall going on the backside, the cold side of this storm. You can start to see where that cold front was. So this kind of trails all the way from central Illinois down through the Tennessee Valley. That's going to be that clearing where the precipitation was. And behind it, you've got those colder winds moving down in from the northwest. So we do have winter weather advisories in place for the southeastern corner of Colorado, and then winter weather advisories and wind advisories in place for the northeastern corner of New Mexico. And that does include that I-25 corridor there from Pueblo down through the Santa Fe and Taos area. Because of this, we'll be seeing strong winds again, gusting between about 45 and 50 miles an hour along that interstate corridor. The nice thing about this is these winds are going to be mostly north-south oriented, so the crosswind's not necessarily a factor here, but it will add to some issues as far as fuel efficiency goes if you're driving north to fight against those winds. Snowfall amounts remaining are going to be fairly light here, but we could see some blowing snow moving across the interstate here, causing some visibility issues as the winds lift up any of that already fallen snow, causing almost some ground blizzard conditions out there as well. Further up towards the north, we've got some lingering snow showers in that I-25 corridor moving from Cheyenne, Wyoming, down towards Fort Collins and into Denver. But overall, not a big snowmaker here across the northern parts of New Mexico and Colorado. What we are going to be watching as far as snow goes is going to be closer up to the Great Lakes. We'll talk about this a little bit more in depth coming up in our next look at weather. Right now, we're going to toss things back over to Christian Thomas, and he's here with our next check of what's trending on social media.
Thanks, Kaylee, for that weather update. Now, in the first social roundabout, I talked about and showed you a video of giraffes picking the Super Bowl winner. And I thought, you know what, let's stick with the animal theme for today. And I found two animal videos on TikTok that have been trending lately. Let's take a look at the first one where families out in the jungle about to cross a rope bridge and some wildlife starts coming at them. Let's take a look.
What?
Duck!
Definitely crazy right there. I'd be freaked out if I was in that position. I don't know how those kids didn't freak out either. Let's take a look at another video. This one's come from Anchorage, Alaska, and it was posted yesterday. It's pretty interesting, especially I've been out in Anchorage, Alaska, and I've seen bull mooses this big, and I would definitely be terrified. Let's take a look at it. Yeah, I think that moose only wanted to talk to that guy about his car's extended warranty. Anyway, that does it for this social roundabout. Thomas, Kelly, what would you do if a bull moose come at you like that out in Anchorage, Alaska?
I don't know. Thomas, would you rather fight a bull moose or a driver that you had to cancel a load on last minute?
Oh, man. Give me the moose. I just know what's coming with that. Drivers can surprisingly hurt your feelings with words. I'd rather take violence.
You'd rather take the moose. All right, Christian, thanks for that. We'll talk to you coming up in the second hour. Let's talk a little bit about what's coming up here on FreightWaves. We are just about a week and a half away from our Global Supply Chain virtual event. Completely free registration for that, and we are excited to bring you 3 days days of incredible information all about basically every piece of the freight atmosphere. February 21st through 23rd. And you know what, Thomas? The best part about that?
There's door prizes.
Prizes, exactly. And you don't have to pay for them. So look at all these great things that you could win. Go on over to live.freightwaves.com. Get registered right now for this virtual event. And while you're there, we've got plenty of others up on the calendar as well. So go ahead and pencil those in. Couple ones that I'm really excited for coming up. Supply Chain Meets FinTech. That's always a really interesting one. And of course, Future of Supply Chain in Cleveland, Ohio.
The big one, and definitely have folks sign up for that. Going to have some really great speakers. Cleveland is known for what?
The
Automotive Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and us now. So definitely check it out when you can. It's our first in-person event of the year. Our second one obviously going to be F3 later on. But otherwise, there's also an Enterprise Trucking Summit and Owner-Operator Summit coming up near the middle of the month. So yours truly, you may see more of me when they finally bring me out of hiding.
There you go. All right. So live.freightwaves.com is your place to go for all of those event signups. Right now, we're going to take a look at the last 24 hours in freight with our market update, and then we'll take a quick break and be right back.
To an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
From the truckload quoting page within TIE-TMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TIE-TMS can optimize your quoting process.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now, starting off your 10 a.m. hour with a check of your top stories on FreightWaves.com this morning. FleetCor Technologies had a better than expected fourth quarter with a revenue of $883.6 million, a 10% increase year over year. Net income came in at $25.3 million, a $0.3 million increase, with adjusted earnings per share of $4.04. FleetCor beat EPS estimates by 13 cents and beat revenue estimates by over $10 million. Chairman and CEO Ron Clark said that organic revenue growth and corporate payments supported the good results. Norfolk Southern's Northeastern network could be facing significant disruptions for the near future as investigators clear the site of a train derailment that happened last week. NS told customers that there was no estimated time for when service might return to the routes. Affected lanes include Chicago to the northeast, Port of New York and New Jersey to Cleveland, Kansas City to the northeast, as well as others. The train derailed last Friday at East Palestine, Ohio, and included 20 cars carrying hazardous material. The incident blocked the two main Norfolk Southern lines that run through that area. XPO registered tonnage growth in the fourth quarter, shedding an industry trend of mid to high-end declines. The company reported fourth quarter earnings per share of 98 cents after market close yesterday, which was 14 cents ahead of consensus and 34 cents higher year over year. The number excluded several items related to the spinoff of its brokerage unit, RXO, changes from its European transportation business, and integration and restructuring costs. Revenue in LTL was 9% higher year over year at $1.09 billion, as tonnage increased 1% and yield grew 8%. U.S. imports logged their highest month-on-month gain since last May and January, with inbound volumes rising 7.2% versus December. The bad news is that last month's imports were almost identical to import stats in January in 2019 and 2020 before the pandemic. February looks weak for imports, according to Port Tracker, which covers 12 U.S. ports. It's reported by the National Retail Federation. Port Tracker reduced its outlook for January to May imports for the year by 3.5%, predicts facilities will handle 1.5 million TEUs in February, down 26% year over year, for the slowest month since May of 2020. And truck drivers saw their average rush hour speeds slow to 36.3 miles per hour at the nation's most congested sections of interstate, according to the latest data from the American Transportation Research Institute. This decreased from 38.6 miles per hour in 2021. The section of Interstate 95 and State Route 4 in Fort Lee, New Jersey was the worst freight bottleneck in the country for the fifth year in a row, with peak hour speeds averaging 20.2 miles an hour. At the top 10 worst locations, all speeds were less than 30 miles an hour. And you can find details of these stories and more up on FreightWaves.com and in our FreightWaves app. Give us a like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and of course, a follow on social media. For everything else, head on over to tv.freightwaves.com. We're going to toss things back over to the wall for our next carrier update with Tony and Donnie.
Welcome into this carrier update. Donnie, going to look at the NTI starting out. Looking at it three different ways. We've got the daily, we've got that 7-day average, and then we have it X fuel.
Yeah, so right up here, the blue is our daily. So you see all the ups and downs, what's happening each day. And it's currently at 2.50, up just a penny from 2.49 on the day before. And we're pretty much, if you can see this dotted line going across here, we're at historic lows with the NTI.
Yeah.
The 7-day rolling average, it's at 250, or it's at what, 249?
Yep.
Yeah, so we're within a penny right now, and we've been pretty steady, pretty close right around in here, but we still expect it to possibly go down just a little bit further.
Yeah.
As we get on through February, because there's not a lot of demand to help push these back up. Now, what I want to do is just kind of show you and compare this to if, we've looked at a lot of contracted rates over the past couple of days. If you took fuel out, it's actually 177. Yeah. So when we're looking at these these drive-in average contract rates at 260 a mile, it's 260 plus fuel.
Yeah.
Well, spot rates are 177 plus fuel.
Yep.
So here there's about a 90-cent difference just right now between contracts and spot market freight.
Just on that line haul segment, right? Not you add in the fuel and it makes it, there's a reason why rejection rates are so low. Contract rates are very attractive right now, and playing in the spot market is We've said it before, right? You said it yesterday. Reduce that exposure to the spot market. It's just not an attractive place to be right now, whereas it was this time last year.
And some carriers do have to use the spot market as sometimes, which is the reason we say reduce your exposure. There are sometimes if you run, Columbus out to Fargo, North Dakota, way out there in the Midwest, you'll end up finding probably some spot freight to bring your truck back. All right, so we see it's declining. It's under a lot of downward pressure, and I saw where the PPI was reduced down to 30. So, and that really shows how weak and the spot market is right now. We'll pop over here and let's look at some diesel fuel here right quick, Tony. Kaylee and John talked about this a little bit earlier, so on the next here, we see that diesel has still continued to go down. It's at 463. Again, now we're at the lowest point here from back at March, but we saw a little increase in the rack price. Now, I said yesterday with a gap between the retail and wholesale of $1.62, we got plenty of room to continue for diesel fuel to fall at the pumps. And you brought up a good point and said, well, Donnie, even though it's at 162, that gap can close very quickly. Let's bring up the gap. Yesterday was at 162. On the next chart here, 149. So we had a 13-cent drop overnight. And that's simple, a small increase here and a small decrease here, and that gap closed. We're still in a good position right now, but you brought up a good point. I'll just show how it works out in these charts. We're now down to $1.50. If that continues to close another 20 cents, we could see diesel fuel start headed back up. And that quick swing is why retail locations are dropping slower than what the rack price drops overall. So Donnie, thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you one more time before the end of the show. Right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee and Thomas.
All right, guys, thank you for that. We're going to welcome in our next live guest. And we've got John Barlew joining us from Kenco to talk a little bit about warehouse safety. John, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Hey, appreciate you having me.
Not necessarily a super exciting topic, but a very necessary one, right? We got to make some strategic investments to keep folks in your warehouses safe because safety is key. What are your top 3 points to ensure warehouse safety? And it goes just beyond posting up some safety postings, right, up on your warehouse floor.
Sure, yeah. So no surprise, the last few years have been pretty crazy. So the complexity from the pandemic and then our own buying habits, I'm guilty too. I want the speed of delivery and e-commerce, and I want, my products today. So all of those factors, along with, talent shortages, the job market being crazy, we really need to focus heavily on our safety cultures at our sites. So really being creative in how we approach the new demands. And managing safety a little bit differently. So, really between investing in our people, creating a strong safety culture, introducing technology and innovations like PPE and exoskeletons to help with ergonomics improvements and musculoskeletal disorder decreases, as well as investing in more robust technology like Fleet Cloud, our proprietary telematics solution that offers real-time location services. And why that's important is, forklift operations in warehouses and people don't mix. So when there's a potential for a forklift and a pedestrian to strike one another, agree that is not a situation that we want to have in our warehouses. So amazing progress that really the whole warehousing, fulfillment, distribution centers have experienced over the last few years in light of the pandemic and our growing complexity that we all demand as consumers.
Talking about exoskeletons, it looks super fascinating. Are we talking about the very large ones like we see in Ridley Scott's Alien, or is this something where more functional ones so I don't pull my back out?
Yeah, so the technology is still evolving. I mean, there are some out there that are they're kind of large and intrusive. However, it's a huge demand from all of us in the warehousing and logistics space. So we are really challenging these engineers and innovators to create more advanced products. We're trialing one here in our innovation lab in particular that's, really comfortable to wear. It's not intrusive. It's fairly, appropriately sized, and it's gender specific too. So depending on your body shape, you have a solution that prevents those lower back injuries, transfers to larger muscle groups so that, our industrial athletes in the warehouses can safely move our products every day.
I love that term industrial athlete, right? Because at the end of the day, you're talking about a warehouse worker who, of course, has to have very physical ability. You're working a very physically demanding job. And I think that it's fascinating and very much needed that you guys at Kenco are taking this approach to be kind of proactive about injury prevention instead of asking, okay, well, you got hurt on the job. Now, how can we adjust your job to keep you working with your injury, right? It's about keeping your people healthy and taking care of them on the front side so they don't get injured. How has this helped you guys kind of look at warehouse retention and job retention? We see a lot of growth in job numbers and hiring when it comes to getting people into these warehousing jobs. But if you're getting into a place like Kenco and their innovation lab where things are working really well, you're being taken care of, I'm sure that makes hiring and retention super, super easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Safety is a core principle for us here at Kenco. So at the moment they come on to one of our job sites or in our fleet or in a warehouse, they're approached with, a strong safety presence, and they're asked to, commit to a very robust safety and health philosophy. And really, the shifting in how we measure safety success has really been kind of a renaissance over the last few years, where we're not just looking at our incident rates or the absence of injury as our measure of success. Rather, we're shifting to a more I'd say more progressive paradigm shift in that we're looking at how associates, employees, drivers contribute to that safety success through, proactive engagement activities. It could be, just developing a strong safety mindset so that weather conditions out on the road, or we just talked about congestion in some of these big cities, how we can manage that stress, how we can manage those internal and external factors in our organization out on the roads so that we make wise and reliable decisions. And so that shift from really just focusing on the injury and some of the sensational details around what caused that injury to more really how are we promoting and influencing a safe workplace is where safety's headed over the next few years.
And diving into telematics as well as optimization, software for visibility platforms, is that something where a lot of times telematics is good for the optimizing the loading and unloading of vehicles, or are these telematics and stuff good from a safety component as well, as in like so I don't get hit by like a forklift or something? What are some of the ways technology is helping?
Well, obviously, being in safety and leading this organization, I focus heavily on what we call high potential events, or what we described as a forklift contact. But yeah, it does work to improve your fleet efficiency as well as maintenance. So the technology built into some of the telematics software is predictive in that it tells you exactly when a maintenance service is needed or how the forklift's being driven. It could be temperature of the forklift to extend your fleet life. The supply chain disruption has affected our fleet inventories as well, and customers are asking, how can we extend the life of these forklifts? So having an onboard computer system like a telematics software has multiple benefits outside of just safety. Like you said, it has business improvements as well.
John, can you touch a little bit on smart warehouses and the introduction of robotics into the space and kind of finding that sweet spot between your human capital, your robotic capital, getting them to work seamlessly together, but keeping it safe?
Yeah, so, kind of pointing back to safety success in general, it's a combination of our people as well as these innovations and tools in unison. So they really have to be integrated to each other. They have to be interdependent. And so as technology advances, we also have to improve our training, our education, as well as how that interfaces with our people. It's kind of a two-lane highway that's running in parallel that we're constantly trying to keep progress at an equilibrium. So without a doubt, safety professionals in particular, operations leaders have to stay up to date on what the newest technology is and how that affects not only operations, but safety in general.
And closing thoughts here as well. When we're looking at improvements in safety, is this something where we're seeing a lot of movement like Kenco and stuff? Are you all, do you see it more pushed technology being developed, or is it something that government, OSHA, and other regulatory things, is it kind of a push-pull situation, or are you being more influenced by government guidelines and then having to react to them?
Yeah, obviously, the minimum acceptable standards, what the regulatory agencies require, and all of us, business and government, are really trying to keep up with the times. Everything accelerated as a result of the pandemic, and so part of that is one, keeping our people safe as new technologies emerge, but really understanding how the people interface into that technology is where we really need to put the practicality of safety to use. So I would say it's probably twofold. Both governmental agencies as well as private business are working together to really advance the profession, as well as improve operational efficiency in warehousing.
And John, if folks want to learn more about Kenco, reach out, or even help get involved, what's the best way to get in contact with you all?
Yeah, so you can visit us online at kencogroup.com, and we're also on all the social media threads, including LinkedIn. So check out Kenco.
Appreciate it, John. Thanks for coming on the show. Yeah. Gonna keep an eye out on those exosuits, though, because I will get me one day. I skipped leg day. But not skipping things, we're going to toss it over to Kaylee Nix for our look at the weather.
Thanks, Thomas. I definitely agree with that exosuit. I think that those are pretty cool. All right, let's talk a little bit about the cold side of that winter storm, which is quick moving, but bringing some pretty decent impacts across the regions of the Great Lakes. We've got freezing rain, we've got strong winds, we've got heavy flooding rainfall, we've got snow, we've got mixed precipitation. Basically, we've got it all as the storm moves very quickly up to the northeast. So let's check it out in some of our critical events. We've got effects going on around the Great Lakes region, all the way from the northern parts of the Great Lakes into the U.S.-Canada border, down in through the northern part of the Central Plains into Missouri. But as I mentioned, moving fairly fast, as this is going to wrap in and out and be out of here by the evening hours into the early parts of tomorrow for the area. So we still have high wind warnings in place across northern Ohio into Pennsylvania, up into Illinois and Indiana as well, as we get some winds wrapping around from the central circulation of that storm. And further up to the north on the cold side, you've got a mix of freezing rain going on across the northern parts of Michigan into northern Illinois and central Wisconsin. And then just up to the north, you've got some actual snow falling across those areas. So snowfall does include up towards upstate New York from Syracuse northwards into the northeast, and then up into Vermont and New Hampshire as well. Winter weather advisories up there into the northeast and up into the southern parts of Maine. But the main story for today is going to be this wraparound snow that's coming through Iowa and into the Chicago area right now. With that, we're going to be seeing snowfall amounts, not super impactful, looking at about 2.5 to 3 inches total. But the strong wind's going to be an issue here as it kicks up some blowing snow, possibly causing some visibility issues along those interstates, I-80 moving through Des Moines, and then up towards the Chicago area, Madison, Wisconsin again. So because of that, we do have winter weather advisories in place, sprinkled in here and there, and some winter storm warnings as well for those areas of highest precipitation, but most folks dealing with the winter weather advisories. Further down towards the south across central Indiana through the Indianapolis area and then down into Louisville, Kentucky, you've got some lingering rainfall that's right in front of the cold front sweeping on through. That cold front not dropping temperatures today, but it will have an effect on temperatures tomorrow and moving into the start of your weekend, which we'll talk about coming up in our last look at weather. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be right back with this week's edition of On the Spot, so don't go away.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
From the truckload quoting page within TieTMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TieTMS can optimize your quoting process.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome into this week's edition of On the Spot. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by special guest Zach Strickland. Zach, I'm going to put you on the spot this week.
Good, I like it.
Yeah, you know, this is a topic that we talk about a lot, and I think it got kind of, the impacts, we didn't see them last year, but this year they're pretty relevant. Lunar New Year and what that means on the ocean front, and then we can talk about what that means, obviously, for transportation here in the U.S., down the road, but we'll pull up a chart here. It's one of my favorites, breaking into Container Atlas. It's our ocean TEU volumes, also known as IOTI, but we're doing China to US. We look over here, look at that drop associated with Lunar New Year. I mean, we're talking like, it's like an 80% drop. But you look back last year, well, 2021, but look here, you saw it in 2022, but the levels were so high that it felt like it didn't actually impact it at all on the ocean.
Yeah, and traditionally, you know, Lunar New Year, you barely even kind of thought about it in domestic transportation when you're talking about those volumes, because if you look at what happened there, you see this big run up right before Lunar New Year. And it's because everybody gets ready for it. They know it's going to occur every single year, right around the end of January, early February. So most of our container freight comes from China, and they get prepped for it. Well, this year you can see the IOTI here on a downward slant and a pretty sharp decline. You know, after they fell off a cliff there in May, they really have been trending down. And of course, that's due largely to the fact that a lot of the retail inventories exceeding expectations in terms of relative to demand.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this obviously is just China, but if you pulled up the entire IOTI, the impact's not near as great, but you do see the increase here from China to the US. But really, overall, you don't see that uptick in late December into January. It didn't exist. I mean, it didn't happen overall, but from China to the US, it did. So when you factor all that in, I mean, the impacts look a lot bigger here, Lunar New Year-wise, than they did to the overall market. But the overall market is really in this downward movement overall.
Yeah. And I think my big takeaway here for domestic transportation providers is the fact that shippers are still correcting their inventories. And we've talked about it, me and Anthony have talked about it on Freightonomics. Consumer demand is still relatively good, but there's a lot of weakness in the forward-looking aspect of the consumer conditions. And maybe something we'll talk about today on Freightonomics, as we have a guest filling in. But yeah, the takeaway here is that don't expect some sort of huge rebound, you know, in terms of overall volume.
Yeah, and this important to remember, this is stuff that's actually left the ports overseas, right? This isn't it's what's going to be coming, but we'll bring up a next chart. It's our bookings data. This is when those bookings are submitted to the ocean carrier. We saw a little bit of a rebound, but it didn't even come back up to where we were in December. Right. And I think that's the concerning part for me is we did see kind of I don't even want to call it a ramp up because wasn't that big of an impact. But seeing this not recover to pre-Lunar New Year is the part that's more concerning to me, especially when you factor in this is what those volumes are going to be in 8, 10, 12 days.
Yeah, I mean, we're still not completely clear of Lunar New Year to keep in mind there. So it's not necessarily like a huge red flag just yet. Lunar New Year, typically you see those vacation periods take about 2 to 3 weeks in China. So I think a lot of people are probably just sitting back. They already know they have the inventory they need. So I'm not super concerned about it just yet. But yeah, to your point, it is a little strange that we're seeing this thing trough out and not really, you see these little spikes?
Yep.
We're really not, we're kind of clear of that initial spike and it hasn't really come back up. So here in the next week or so, I'm really keeping an eye on this one because if this doesn't jump back up, to, somewhat close to where it was pre-Lunar New Year, that is a pretty deep warning sign for the rest of the economy.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at Lunar New Year last year, right? We see the big drop in bookings, but then they come up and they trend higher. Well, they came up and they've just kind of flatlined, right?
Yeah.
And that's again, it's like you said, it's not a concern yet, but it's something to pay attention to. And why is that so important? We'll bring up.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the spike there in October, that's Golden Week.
Yeah,
right there. You see these big spikes. This one right here in 2022, it recovers pretty quickly, and we're not seeing that just yet.
Yeah, and why it recovers very quickly is we'll bring up this next chart. We see a spike here in lead times, right? We're talking almost 14 days, that 2-week stretch from, hey, this is when we're going to move freight 2 weeks from now, put it onto those vessels that are leaving. Well, now it's coming back down. It's 8 days or so, but you see the spike, the reaction to it. They know it's happening, but you don't see any bookings. There's not that rush of bookings coming back as these correct themselves.
Yeah, the sense of urgency is completely gone right now. And until that returns, and that's what really creates a lot of the chaos in the domestic side. You know, that's what drives the rates higher. The big concern here is that maybe some of these demand destruction activities have overstepped a little bit. Now, and the Fed's still talking about raising interest rates. So, and there's two sides of the economy. There's the service and there's the goods. Yeah. And the services side is doing very well. But anybody involved in transportation is feeling this more pronounced because not only are consumers having less money to spend on goods, they're spending it elsewhere on their services and paying more for flights and things like that. So this is a really concerning trend that I think a lot of the freight providers and transportation providers have been somewhat optimistic about the back half of the year. And I don't feel great until this thing finally hits its floor.
Yeah, and I don't think we're there yet, especially when I look at IOTI, again, not just from China, but overall. And from all ports around the world into the U.S., that thing is still on the decline. And China has an impact on that, but so do other places. And if we're not bringing things in from outside of China and we see that big decline, and everything else is on the decline, where are we getting the freight that's moving? And as we're trying to ramp up manufacturing here, I think that's the concern for me is, like you mentioned, consumers still has some headwinds, at least on the good side, right? They are spending on services, but the good spending that we saw the past 2 years is just non-existent.
Yeah.
And we're not going to go back to those levels.
And of course, nearshoring and friendshoring, people are going to cite that as part of this, but you don't replace China overnight. It's simply not enough. And we are seeing some upticks in Mexico and Canada, but it's not near enough. Actually, the biggest strength has been from other Asian countries who also celebrate Lunar New Year.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just a Chinese thing. It is a region-wide
regional thing.
Yeah, so it's something obviously to pay attention to as we move in, because ultimately this stuff, when it hits the ports here, it ends up on a truck at some point. That's why it's like we got to pay attention in the back half. Really, at this point, this stuff moving in the back half of the year isn't going to be there to move.
Yeah, and right now it's just sitting in a warehouse.
Yep. Thank you so much for joining me this week on this week's On the Spot, Zach. We'll be sure to check in with you with Freightonomics. Right now, we'll take a quick break, but we'll be back with more FreightWaves Now.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Wasson, Enterprise Trucking Carrier Expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
From the truckload quoting page within TIE-TMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TIE-TMS can optimize your quoting process.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
It's a good day coming.
And welcome back to FreightWaves Now for a final check of weather on this Thursday morning. It's been a pretty nice week temperature-wise across the southeastern United States, but that's going to quickly come to an end thanks to that cold front that slid across the country this week. And with that, we're going to see a little bit of a lingering temperature from a secondary backdoor cold front that's going to come through the southeast this weekend as well. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. These are our minimum surface temps for the next 3 days. So this is today through your Sunday morning. Temperature is going to be pretty chilly, at least for the southeastern parts of the country. So we look at our lows dipping into the low teens, some mid-20s up for the Mountain West. Down into Texas and Oklahoma, we're going to be seeing lows settle in about the lower 20s. For us here down in the southeast as well, we'll be just at that freezing point, if not slightly below it for our lows by the time that the weekend hits. Sad news for Zach Strickland, though, who was expecting some snowfall out of this. We are not going to get any snow coming here across the southeast, just enough to keep it cold for your mornings on Saturday and Sunday. Further up to the northwest, however, though, the mountains through Idaho, Wyoming, and into Colorado, looking at temperatures being bitterly cold with some of that winds sneaking down from the northwest. Low temperatures settling into the 0 to 5 degree range. Some negatives through the Front Range in Colorado. Wind chill's going to be dipping down again into the negative 10s to negative teens in some of those spots. Same thing up towards the northern parts of the plains, Minnesota through Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota. Going to be seeing temperatures settling again with your lows around 0 to 5. Wind chills in that negative 5 to 10 range. We've got wind advisories in place again across South Dakota and into North Dakota and Nebraska, with some of those winds coming through, which is going to help drop those temperatures. So even though we're going to be seeing sunshine and clouds going to be clearing out, it's going to be that deceptive cold where it looks nice from the inside. When you step outside, it is not very nice out there. That's it for weather today. We'll talk about it to finish up your week tomorrow here on FreightWaves Now. Right now, we'll toss things over to Christian Thomas for our next check of the Social Roundabout.
Thanks, Katie, for those weather updates. Now, if you're here on the East Coast like I am, you're about an hour and a half away from noon, which is lunchtime. If you haven't picked lunch out yet, I suggest some pizza because it is National Pizza Day today. definitely get out there and get some of that pizza. Maybe we can order some here at the office. I don't know. Kaylee's trying to get that in the works. We'll see what happens. Let's change it up a bit. Let's go over and check out the Super Bowl coming up this weekend. Let's check out Baby Giraffe out in Des Moines, Iowa, picking who the winner could be. Let's take a look.
Well, the Super Bowl just 4 days away, and people are laying their bets on who will win between the Eagles and Chiefs, and even the animals at the Blank Park Zoo have an opinion about the game. This morning, Bakari, the zoo's baby giraffe, made its pick by eating leaves by the Kansas City Chiefs logo. Faked you out, Eagles, with some help from the baby's mother. The Blank Park Zoo says its animals have correctly picked the winner in 9 of the last 12 Super Bowls. So keep that in mind if you're making a bet.
Picking the Chiefs to win it all. I believe that's who I may be rooting for this weekend, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, that does it for our social roundabout for today. Isaiah Buchanan will be back tomorrow to catch you up on what's trending even more. But right now, we're going to continue our freight conversation with Bill Priestley. Take it away.
Welcome in again to our freight conversation. And this week we have a great guest to look forward to some great answers with. Ryan Schreiber joining us from Metafora, joining us on location. Ryan, how you doing?
I usually am joining from location, yeah. But this location, beautiful Las Vegas. So I'm down a lot. I don't know. At some point, somebody might come and grab me and try and break my kneecaps. But otherwise, so if that happens, maybe, cut that out in post. But otherwise, I'm doing pretty well. Thanks, man. Good to see you again.
Oh, I'm keeping that in there. Absolutely. Let's go ahead here. Obviously. Yeah. So last week, excuse me, we had Ann Rinke on, president of TIA, and you know how this works. So she posed an idea, and here's what she said.
Well, I think a couple things. So we talk about the security of freight. We talk about collaborating on freight. We have some bad actors in our freight space that are frauds or commit fraud or are committing double brokering or committing, they're dispatch agents who are essentially brokering freight. And will the railroads care? No, probably not. But certainly the carriers will care and the shippers will care about how we can actually improve that. We have a regulatory agency that's constrained in its resources, and they think in its authority to regulate that space because these are commercial events, not safety events. We would argue that these actually are safety and security events. We had a member who arranged transportation for a load of meat 2 weeks ago. Turned out it was to a fraudulent carrier who gave it to a dispatch service out of some other country. Long story short, we don't know where this meat is. So my point is there is fraud in that market. How can we figure out in the marketplace, how can we figure out ways if we can't get FMCSA because of constrained resources to be engaged, what can we do together to collaborate? And I think there's interest there. Certainly we've talked to some in the owner operator space. I think there's some interest there of how do we actually work together to figure out solutions.
So with that, bad actors at play, how do you deal with it? Big question. What's your take?
It's interesting. It's something that I'm actually super, super passionate about. So as you know, as most people know, my background is as an attorney. Like I don't practice, but it's something I'm really passionate about. So in the industry, carrier compliance and onboarding and monitoring carriers, et cetera, is really, really important. And everything that Ann said is true, right? We have major issues at the legislative level, at the administrative agency level with the DOT, the FMCSA, and Congress. Funding is an issue, et cetera. So, we're not going to solve fragmentation. So, I mean, let's kind of take some of the things off the table. Sure. If there was consolidation, that would be helpful, but it's not going to go that way. Additionally, the FMCSA is not likely to get additional funding in ways that would allow technology to solve the problem directly. So there systemically is not going to be major change that's going to save the day. So realistically, as you kind of look at the ecosystem that we have, right, where we are, the players that we have involved, et cetera, we need to really consider how we're leveraging data to make better decisions at the organizational level. And I think there's a couple of ways in which we need to think about that. Number one, what's going to be really, really important is, and this is starting to happen. I'm glad it's starting to happen because for the longest time it wasn't happening, but companies are thinking differently about data and understanding that some data that all data is not created equal, right, Bill? Like some data has much more value to you by keeping it hidden, and other data points are much more valuable when they're exposed to the market and they can be anonymized and aggregated and we can learn from them, right? So there's a couple of those things that are in play. So number one, that trend needs to continue and accelerate. We need trucking companies, we need brokerages to be able to contribute data to products, to consortiums, to whatever it might be that's going to help us track and identify carriers and bad actors, right? And so that's going to be really, really important, because what that'll allow us then to do is to apply next generation technologies like machine learning, artificial intelligence to identify patterns that we can then leverage to make better decisions and the like. And so it becomes less of an issue of, kind of figure it out within the four walls of your business, and a little bit more collaborative, but not collaborative, right, in a I don't get without giving, or kind of pure altruism. Like it's going to be, it's also not going to be like a band all together and create a coalition to fight. It's just that's not how people act and operate. And so there's technology right now that's working on solving this problem. Carrier 411 had tools that were really valuable. That product hasn't kind of evolved over time. RMIS, same concept. So you're seeing entrants come into that market that are trying to work on this problem. You have Carrier Assure by Cassandra Gaines. You have Highway with Jordan Graft that are working on taking a lot of this information in and then not just presenting it to a user, but but creating an environment where you're assisting folks in making better decisions by synthesizing that data and being able to do it. So I think that it is a great question. It's something I'm very passionate about. It's an incredibly complicated problem to solve, but it absolutely has to start with data, and it has to start with assisting the users in making those better choices, not tasking them with deciding, to read a Freight Guard report and then make a choice.
All right. Well, Ryan, time now for you to kind of direct the conversation whichever way you want to take it. Let's say you're in a room with everybody in freight. You are at the podium. Where would you like the conversation to go?
Well, you and I covered a lot. So as we often
but we also scratched the surface too. I mean, there's a whole lot more we didn't talk about.
I would really love to. I'm going to go back to talking about autonomous vehicles because I don't think that we talk about it enough. I think that often the conversation around autonomous vehicles just centers on sort of extremes of the conversation. Oh, they're going to take everybody's jobs. Like it's right around the corner, or it's never going to happen. And so I think there's a middle, right? And I find myself in the middle, which is I'm bullish on it. I think it's really important. And I think we need to figure it out. And also there are very real challenges to where it is today. So I'd love the next person to start by talking about, what, starting from kind of like a growth mindset perspective of, okay, everything's a problem to solve. Like, what are some of the major problems that we need to solve for right now that can help make meaningful progress on autonomy, not from a technological perspective, because the technology is pretty good, not from a technology perspective, but from a change management perspective. What do we need to do to change people's behavior? How do we change people's behavior? How do we change people's thought process around around autonomous vehicles to drive a better, safer environment on the road for the professional drivers, and to protect the professional drivers from four-wheelers who are trying to kill themselves and kill other people. So I'd love to hear somebody talk a little bit more about that, because I think that conversation could use some more attention.
Ryan Schreiber of Metafora, thanks so much for joining us on our Freight Conversation.
Thanks always for having me, Bill.
And you can hear the entire conversation with Ryan Schreiber of Metafora on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/FreightWaves. Ryan also talks about the development of freight tech and where we are now and where we're going, and what we might need to leave behind, unfortunately. That's the Freight Conversation, of course, with Ryan Schreiber, available on youtube.com/FreightWaves. Hit that like and subscribe button, folks. But speaking of liking and subscribing, you have to subscribe to this quick break, and then we're going to have a final look at our carrier as well as headlines. Hang in there.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest freight tech news at FreightWaves.com.
From the truckload quoting page within TieTMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TieTMS can optimize your quoting process.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
And welcome back to FreightWaves. Time for one final check of your headlines this morning. U.S. imports logged their highest month-on-month gain since last May and January, with inbound volumes rising 7.2% versus December. The bad news is that last month's imports were almost identical to import stats in January of 2019 and 2020 before the pandemic. February looks weak for imports, according to Port Tracker, which covers 12 U.S. ports, as reported by the National Retail Federation. Port Tracker reduced its outlook for January to May imports by 3.5%, predicts facilities will handle 1.57 million TEUs in February, down 26% year over year for the slowest month since May of 2020. Truck drivers saw their average rush hour speed slow to 36.3 miles per hour at the nation's most congested sections of interstate, according to the latest data from the American Transportation Research Institute. This decreased from 38.6 miles per hour in 2021. The section of Interstate 95 and State Route 4 in Fort Lee, New Jersey was the worst freight bottleneck in the country for the fifth year in a row, with peak hour speeds averaging 20.2 miles per hour. At the top 10 worst locations, all speeds were less than 30 miles an hour. And the U.S. Postal Service is Ties with California-based Caminati's Trucking after the company reportedly violated safety regulations and had drivers involved in 2 fatal crashes in the last 2 years. The Postal Service terminated the mail contract last Friday and expects to have a replacement carrier named within 2 weeks. The company has 46 power units and 37 drivers, according to the FMCSA. And you can find details of those stories and more by heading on over to FreightWaves.com. Give us a like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and of course a follow on all of our social media channels. Head on over to tv.freightwaves.com for anything else you might have missed. We're going to toss things back over to Tony and Donnie. We've got one final carrier update of the morning.
Welcome into the final carrier update. Means our of the day. Donnie, one of the markets we talked about all day, pretty much, Houston, Texas. Seeing rates actually continue to move lower. Just because there's more volume doesn't mean rates are moving up.
Correct, and that's the deterioration of the market. Just because we saw the market share increase, well, we showed that the reason that these rates are going down is actually because even though it gained market share, only gained market share because it did not deteriorate like all the rest of the markets. So, but this is why we have the market dashboard. This is what you should do. When you find markets that are interesting or that catch your eye for some reason, bring them up, run some lanes. We got Houston to Atlanta, so we're headed east. 795 miles, about an 800-mile run, but we got a downward trend, just like our NTI shows you, which is good about our NTIs. Follow the trend. You'll see this in a lot of the lanes. It's deteriorated down about $2.21 a mile. So this is a pretty tough run right now for a spot rate. Now, if you get a lot of money going into Houston, this might want to be your exit because let's look at Houston going to Chicago, or the next chart here. All right. $1.99, so it's a little bit cheaper going to Chicago, but Chicago is a better market than Atlanta, but you're going to run that at almost 1,100 miles at $1.99. So it might want to get to Atlanta, then maybe see if you can get a better rate from Atlanta going to Chicago.
Yeah, it's where you can, it's almost gamifying it, right? Where, yes, I might have to take a tough rate one leg, but if I can make it up on another leg, well, maybe it's not so bad to take a rate that you normally wouldn't take or want to take.
It's kind of a triangle.
Yep.
So you get a really good rate, but if you get a really outstanding rate, you're probably going to a bad area.
Yep.
So then you're going to have to take a tough lane to get out of that area, but you want to land back in a strong market to get that next run. That's going to be back profitable again. So that's the way the freight system works. So now but this can get worse. Let's go out to the West Coast here. Let's do the next chart here. Houston out to Los Angeles, $1.90. This is over a 1,500-mile run. Now, this would have been a good run maybe 7, 8, 9 months ago because rates off the West Coast were still hot. They have deteriorated now. So coming back across the country, rates have come down, and it's really tough running coast to coast. Again, if you can get those lanes, fill up before you get to into California and get a good long haul that's where you're not stopping. You can still make money on these long haul, but the margins are going to be really tight.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting a lot closer to that operating cost of running the truck when you start taking some of these. I mean, again, you said $1.90. Wasn't so bad a year ago, really.
Yeah.
Now it's a little tougher to swallow when you're going out to the West Coast.
Yep. Next chart here, we'll look at a couple more here right quick. We hadn't talked much about the Pacific Northwest. There's a reason. The rates are really tough up there. It's also some of the highest areas. You know, San Francisco is one of the highest fuel markets in the nation. With fuel almost still at $6 a gallon. So here we look at lanes coming Seattle back to Los Angeles, $1.31 a mile. You're definitely losing some money. So this definitely needs to be a contracted portion. Maybe you get some spot rate maybe from Los Angeles to Seattle and come back on a contract, or do the whole thing under a contract. This is probably why rejection rates are so low along the West Coast, is because you almost cannot operate at spot rates right now.
Yeah, I mean, where you're talking along I-5, talking upwards $5.50, $6 a gallon still for diesel, it makes taking $1.31 all-in rate very, very difficult to do. Well, thank you, Donnie, for the updates today. We'll be sure to check in with you again tomorrow. Right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee and Thomas.
All right, guys, thank you for that. We're done here for your Thursday on FreightWaves Now. But as always, lots more coming up for the rest of your day. If Anthony were here, he would tell you that it is the 1 hour countdown to the newest episode of Freightonomics. We also have a refuel with Scott Bearhang this afternoon.
Exactly. Going to be Tony Mulvey coming on, filling in for Anthony, of course, on Freightonomics, as well as Taking the Higher Road and 18 Wheels Across America, and finally People Speaking Rail at 3 p.m. Eastern. This is just the beginning, folks. But speaking of beginnings, we'll have a new one tomorrow as well, for FreightWaves Now at least.
Absolutely. We'll be back live at 9 a.m. And between all of that, you've got plenty of time to head on over to live.freightwaves.com. Get yourself registered for our Global Supply Chain Week virtual event coming up in just about a week and a half here on FreightWaves. It is, in fact, free to register. You might get yourself into one of those shiny door prizes, everything from an Apple speaker to an Apple TV to a big green egg. That's it. We'll see you guys tomorrow starting live at 9. Have a great rest of your Thursday.
Leading industry journalists and market experts. On FreightWaves.com, you can also watch the only